welcome to NEK VT Rocks. And today is somebody everybody knows. In fact, he's right at home here. Hi, Tod.
I am right at home here.
I know.
It's kind of funny sitting here, though, because, like, as a lot of people know, we moved our studio.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time in here hanging lights and hanging curtains, but I've never really sat down to enjoy it all.
So everything that's in here is all your fault?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Not all of it. Not all of it. That's not.
Oh, hey, that's good.
They can't see it in here, but.
So what we're going to talk about today is music as an agent of social change.
I thought that was a great idea.
Which is how some of us got into the music industry. Those of us who are kids of the 60s. I mean, you're a kid of the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, I'm a product of the kids of the 60s, I guess.
Right, exactly. We're really familiar with music as a way of giving a message. And that could be a good message or a bad message. Something that's really interesting is last night, interesting to me anyway, we flipped the TV on last night and just caught a piece of something that was on public TV, which was one of those three tenors kinds of shows. And it was three guys with gorgeous voices, and they were singing this song that we all knew and could sing along with, that sort of has this wonderful crescendo of music that goes up and down. You can follow it along. We all know the chorus, except if you listen to the words, it's the battle hymn of an abuser. It's the song Delilah.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Jones. Look at the words of that song. So here we all are singing about how it's perfectly okay to knife her because she laughed at him. Break down her door, knife her because she laughed at him.
Huh. I've never really studied the lyrics.
It's appalling.
There's a lot of that.
Right. Beat me, kick me, I'll take it. Stand by your man no matter what he does.
Right.
But how do we use music for positive change? It's about experiencing music as a way of taking us from a place that's horrible to one that's so much better. And you're a musician. How do you do it?
I am. What personally draws me to it is the communal aspect of performing. I'm probably one of the rare musicians that I'm not as interested in being in the studio as I am being on stage, and it's because of that connection with an audience, which is what music kind of always was. If you look back, way back, musicians were kind of like community organizers.
Troubadours. That's what troubadours were.
like Woody Guthrie. I don't think Woody Guthrie was like super famous in his day. I mean, he was, but not like what we consider a Bob Dylan. You know, I mean, Bob Dylan, super fame and riches and
but there wouldn't have been Bob Dylan if it hadn't been for Woody Guthrie.
Yeah, but I kind of find that interesting how, and I'm just using Woody Guthrie as an example because I don't really know who came before him, I guess, but he traveled by train across the country and sang to rail yard workers and starving families and was like a voice for people, bringing them together as a community. And that fascinates me, and I don't know how easy that is to do nowadays.
It's a good question.
I don't even think it's affordable to travel by train anymore.
Not
the last time I looked.
But there are other ways of doing it. I mean, the Underground Railroad, that was supported by music. That's how the message was conveyed.
Really?
Yeah. If you look at a lot of the songs from that time, they were messages to people slaves who were escaping.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that rings a bell now, because they would sing the songs. They'd learn the words, but the words had messages.
Yes.
And the man or the powers that be weren't really paying attention, because people don't always pay attention to the lyrics of the songs.
Which is how Delilah survived as long as it has.
It's funny. I'm really curious to look at the lyrics for Delilah, but there's a lot of songs that are just kind of really bizarre when you look at the lyrics.
Yeah.
But if they got a good melody.
Right. And there's a lot of songs that are truly, really dumb.
Sure.
But then there are so many songs that have such powerful lyrics, powerful poetry that has been put to music. I mean, look at Leonard Cohen's work.
Oh, yeah. He's one of the people, whenever I get stuck trying to write lyrics, if you go to his website, his lyrics are all
everywhere,
alphabetized.
Yes.
And I don't, I should make this clear, I don't steal his lyrics. I just read them because it kind of kickstarts. I think that's one thing that's harder to find out with the internet. But the way everything's saturated, it's harder to find now really, truly meaningful lyrics in songs. Because we don't broadcast that anymore. No. It's out there, but you need to know where to look. I mean, I suppose it's no different than it was before. I don't think old traditional, well, not traditional, but like old folk songs were really being played on the radio, or old protest songs.
They weren't in this country. Right. They were played, or a lot of them were played in Europe, and that's why Nina Simone moved to Europe.
Really?
Because she couldn't get gigs here. I mean, there's a woman with incredible talent.
Wow.
Singing very political songs. Billie Holiday. And so much of her music was, quote, dumbed down so that people truly didn't get what she was singing. Yeah. Look at Strange Fruit.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. That's a really powerful song.
Yeah.
But she had a hit with that, right?
Well, she did, but imagine the cost to her of singing that.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I guess I don't think people really realize how incredibly powerful. I kind of use the analogy of art too.
Yes.
There's a huge difference between say Picasso and Bob Ross.
Yes.
And and not to disparage Bob Ross or anything, but we tend to really champion and cherish Bob Ross as far as popular culture goes. And kind of look down upon the Picassos or the Georgia O'Keeffes or something, because you have to think a little bit more for that. It's not just prettier. It's not just.
It's also generational.
I think so.
And if you look at what young people are listening to now, a lot of it's got a really strong political content.
It's starting to. It didn't. My generation, because I guess I'm not really considered. I'm not a millennial, so I'm not really considered the younger generation anymore.
I'm just an old hippie.
Well, but your generation really, really took social change.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, you had the Beatles who went from I Want to Hold Your Hand to, by the time John Lennon was assassinated, basically. He was very political.
Yes, he was.
I don't think Paul and Ringo really got there. George did a little bit. So, yeah, and our generation didn't have a lot of that. We did have Rage Against the Machine.
Yes, I loved Rage Against the Machine.
I love to point to them.
They were amazing.
Because you read their lyrics, and there's a great video online now. There's this guy that reviews hip-hop songs.
Yeah.
And he drives in his car, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like, all these people that, like, record videos in their car, like it's a recording studio now. But anyway, he sets his GoPro up or whatever, and he puts an album in that's suggested by the followers or subscribers of his YouTube channel. He drives around and reviews it. And somebody suggested Rage Against the Machine, and he was like blown away by the way it makes you feel, by the subject matter.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that he'd never heard of it, because he looked to be about my age, and that was like right when I was in high school. They're one of the ones. It's sad for me to say, but I really gravitated towards Bob Dylan when I was probably 14 or 15 years old, but I didn't really understand what
the context was doing. Right.
Rage Against the Machine is what woke me up as a teenager.
Right.
When I started to realize what they were talking about. And they've recorded like Tom Joad, which is like the Woody Guthrie song. They did a whole album of covers, and they did a lot of I think everything they ever did was political, pretty much. But
there's a heavy metal band called Demented who have done some really powerful stuff too. Some that's original, and some that they've taken and remade, covered of other people's, and really made it hit home.
Yeah, and it's what I find interesting too nowadays, and I'm not real familiar with Demented, but I know I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
And I know Terry's nodding his head back there. Yeah, he's like, yeah.
He's Demented, right?
He probably knows who they are, right?
Yeah.
No, we'll be checking that out later today. But I find versus like this generation is much more bringing about social change through hip hop.
Right. And rap.
And rap. Yeah.
And in rap, if you really listen to the words in rap, and delete some of the bits that use language that some of us don't want to use.
Right.
Or can't use for obvious
some
reasons.
of it's just plain angry.
Understandable.
Understandable, yeah. But it's interesting, that's what pop music, you're certainly not going to find that in.
It's pretty insipid.
Yeah, and I think was it always, though? Because
yes, pop music always was.
Well, right, I guess that's not what I meant, though. In the 60s, though, you had that brief period with Dylan, kind of sparked this revolution, and they actually were playing songs like that on the radio for a while. I don't think that would happen these days. I'd be surprised. Maybe. Well, college radio, you know, AAA, independent, you know, publicly funded radio stations.
You'd really have to look for it on things like Spotify and Pandora.
Yeah.
But those are just corporate machines to make life really difficult for musicians, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
You can tell I'm not a big fan of those sites, and I understand the reason for people using them.
Yeah, I'm so caught between that, because I like nothing more than to buy an album and look at the liner notes, and a lot of times now I'll buy vinyl, and if I get it in the mail on like a Wednesday, I'll wait till Sunday till I have a chance to put it on and make a cup of coffee. But I also, you know, last night I was rehearsing with the guys. We're getting ready to record our next album, and we're trying to like, no, this beat should be more like this. Like Lucinda Williams would have done it, and then you just instantly can go on Spotify and pull up, you know,
what she did.
Yeah, we pulled up Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, and I don't remember which song it was now, but there it is. And I'm so guilty of that too. Just like whenever I want to hear something now, it's just instant, which it never was before. But at the same time, it's kind of made music less. I don't want to say valuable. It's made it. I don't know.
It's made us lazy.
It has definitely made us lazy.
And sometimes it's harder to look wider.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the wonderful things about music is where it takes you. So you may start off with something you hear on the radio or at a show, and you look that up, and then it's where do you go next? What does that plug into?
Yeah.
And yet Spotify and Pandora stop us doing that.
It does. It has their algorithms. Like, oh, if you like this,
it's just a stream.
You might like this. Yeah, and sometimes it's right. Everything's bound to be right.
Absolutely.
At some point.
But given what's happening in the world right now, which is not really very pleasant.
It's not. It's crazy.
How can you, as a musician, begin to facilitate some of the changes that we really need to see happening?
This is my probably personal opinion, but I feel like if you can do it in a positive way, you're going to get a better reaction. So I've never been political at all in my music, because I went to Nashville back in the day, and my manager told me there's two things that you don't want to do, and that's talk about religion and politics. And my joke to this is there's three things you don't want to talk about: religion, politics, and whether or not Bob Dylan was a good singer. Because you'll get people arguing all the time.
That's true.
But this is actually something that they told me in Nashville, and this is when I was in my 20s. So I realize now, I know where they were coming from, and I know it was controlled by money.
Right.
But he said, don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, because you're immediately going to cut your audience in half and alienate half of them. And so I adhered to that for the longest time, and I'll make the joke on stage sometimes that, like, you know, if I've only got 6 fans, I can't afford to piss off 3 of you, you know. However, this new album that I'm recording right now is quite a bit different, and there is a lot more political stuff, and I do talk about religion on the album, and but it's not mean-spirited. Like, what I've personally tried to do is be more observational and get the audience, or whoever's listening, I guess I should say, to kind of think about it. Because I think if you can spark thoughts.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, I've, let's say, the religion or the politics one?
No, let's go with politics.
Okay, so I wrote a song called Collide.
Yeah.
And I think you've heard it.
I have heard
I've rewritten this song about 4 times now, so you probably haven't heard the newest version.
Okay.
But what I really tried to do in that song was be observational with what I saw going around. So I'll mention like a riot in the streets, or I'll mention people that are cursing over barricades at one another. But I'm not saying that that's right, or I'm not saying that's wrong. And what that song in particular suggests is that when we completely divide ourselves, we're hurting ourselves.
Yes.
But then it also says, we've kind of always done this. Like, maybe this is just what humankind is. Maybe that will never change. I hope that's not the case. But if you look back through history, people have always kind of been jerks to each other. And for ridiculous things like money and power, which I don't have either of those things. So what I think's worked well with that song for me, and they're not all like this. Some of my other ones are a little more pointed, but that song in particular, my father is probably the polar opposite of I am as far as
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and he would agree with that too. He likes that song because it doesn't pick a side and just say you're wrong. It basically says, how can we come together? And that's to me what music is. You can get you get a bunch of people in a room, and if you're lucky enough to get that magic where everybody just kind of feels at one, even if you can only do it for 3 minutes, it's so cool. It's so much better than when everybody's on their phones.
Exactly.
Which is really tough.
One of my day jobs in the past was working with the organization Clearwater, which was the group that was about cleaning up the River Hudson and an overtly political organization, environmental, social change. And it was started by Pete Seeger.
Yeah, when I'd asked you about that, because we were emailing back and forth, as soon as you wrote back to me, I was like, I know what that was. He was very instrumental in that. He lived right on that river for years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you ever had the opportunity to see Pete work with small children, it was fascinating. He never told them what to think.
Yeah.
He sort of laid out options. I mean, he had a whole repertoire of songs about a rainbow race, for example, about bringing people together. Many kids have learned that. You probably learned it in school too. That's a pretty political song.
Yeah.
That's a song about social change. That's about looking at diversity and what we gain by accepting diversity and welcoming it.
It's funny because he was very much that type of performer, that community.
Yes.
But wasn't he like not ostracized by the government, but they basically think he was a communist at one point?
He was brutalized during the McCarthy era because he was considered to be a communist. But, you know, anybody
because
who...
he played banjo and sang folk songs.
Precisely. You know, anybody who... Don't get me started on that one. Yes, he was.
Yeah.
So he certainly understood about oppression from somebody trying to destroy his career and life.
But he never seemed bitter. I mean, I've only seen interviews, but he never seemed bitter about it. He always just...
He kept right on going.
Yeah, that's pretty
just
amazing.
Continued to do the job that he did. Yeah. What he was brilliant at doing was coming up with an idea. He was the magical thinker who could come up with this beautiful big picture. Yeah. And then he'd say, and how do we get there? And he'd step back and expect everybody else to just do it. And you know, that's what happened every time.
Huh.
He had this dream, fantasy of putting a boat on the River Hudson.
Yeah.
And it would be wonderful because it could clean up the Hudson. I mean, the reality of building a boat to do that never came into it, but it was done.
Yeah, I was gonna
volunteers did it.
They have that now.
That's right. That's how it happened.
I have a friend that lives on the Hudson, and they'll post pictures of it.
The Clearwater, yeah. It's fabulous. Yeah. But that's the personality, and that's what musicians can do. You can offer a vision. John Lennon, imagine.
Yeah, oh yeah, you can.
That's a vision.
That's probably the best song ever written. It may be. I think it's one of them. Certainly in the top.
It's a beautiful song.
give peace a chance too. And
yes.
It's so simple, and it's horribly recorded. But yeah, I think
you could re-record that.
Yeah, I wonder if it must have been done.
Oh yes, but there's not a reason not to do it again. Your own version.
Very true. It is interesting, and I think that's kind of what interests me more now. Now that I'm getting closer to 40, I don't care about being on the tour bus anymore and on MTV. Well, I don't think MTV has music anymore, but
no.
I'm more interested. I guess maybe more like Pete Seeger than I thought, but the community to me is huge. I think what's tough now, and I certainly don't know how a lot of people do it, is you have to make a living too.
Yes.
And it's so. I wouldn't say that I do music for the chance to make money, but it's very expected that whenever there's a social gathering or something, well, why don't you just come play music for free?
Right.
And
that's so disrespectful.
Yeah, and there's a merit to that, and if it's a cause that I believe in, I certainly will do it. But you do need to make money sometimes, and
musicians have to eat.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot about like Pete Seeger as far as financially how he did, but I think he did okay. But I know artists like Woody Guthrie. I keep going back to. He didn't have any money.
He didn't have anything.
Robert Johnson had nothing.
There are very few wealthy folk musicians. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Or any musicians, really.
Exactly.
But it is interesting.
Or artists in any form. Yeah. Writers, painters.
It is interesting to see the differences, too, though, of like the artists that will just never go there and will just do, the status quo. And then the artists that will put stuff on the line, like Steve Earle.
Yes.
That guy has upset more people probably than he's impressed, but at the same time he was massively against the death penalty and very outspoken about it. He just a couple years ago wrote the City of Immigrants song,
right?
And he's always done that, and they don't play him on the radio, but he does have that following.
He has a very large following. Go to one of his concerts, it's packed.
Yeah, I'm one of his followers.
Exactly.
But outside of hip hop and rap, there really aren't a lot of people doing that anymore.
There are more people. Some of the newer folkies
that we know about,
that are coming, are being more public with their music. It's more available. We have things like Facebook.
Yeah.
Now the social media, and a powerful song gets sent around. It really does.
It does. Yeah, it's funny, and I wonder if it's the spurts. 60s, 80s didn't do anything. 90s did a little bit. Early 2000s didn't really do anything. The early 2000s are more like overt patriotism,
Whatever that means.
Yeah, and now it's so it must be coming in circles, I guess.
I think because people are seeing some of what's happening currently in the world and in the USA.
Yeah.
They're starting to wake up.
Yeah. And they should. I mean, I was listening to the radio the other day, and so Kim Jong-un, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
He has his own personal band that follows around and plays music just for him. Can you imagine being a musician in North Korea? Because that's probably the top. That's probably, that's probably, you're doing really well if you're the musician that gets to follow around the dictator.
Actually, that would be an absolutely terrifying job.
It's terrifying, yeah.
Because he can switch from you're a wonderful musician to off with your head.
Right. But that's kind of the reality that they live in. And here, we can write a song about the government.
We can today.
And say this is wrong. Now, some people will absolutely, for lack of a better word, stone you for doing that.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. But a lot of people will champion you for doing that as well. So I guess it's a lot of it's how much you're willing to put yourself out there. And,
right.
and whether or not your credibility will be harmed or. Yeah, I guess it's not a lot different than it was back in the 60s.
I don't ever see musicians' credibility being harmed by being honest and open about who they are and what they think.
Yeah.
You're not being paid to sort of sing along.
Right.
You're being paid to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Well,
Hard
and
as that is.
And that's what you want when you go to a show. You want to
Right.
feel connected to the person that's on the stage and presenting to you, right?
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Do you know the other thing that fascinates me, and I meant to bring it up earlier, but we also have a great way of taking a song for what it was, and we talked about this a little bit, and then reinterpreting it to something that it's not at all, like This Land Is Your Land.
Yes.
We learned that in school. We learned how to play that on the recorder, that god-awful plastic instrument.
I remember that.
They leave out a whole verse of that
Yes,
song.
they do. And it's a really important verse. It's actually the most important verse of the whole song.
Yeah, it's not just talking about, the fields of amber and all how beautiful the sky is. I mean, he's talking about a line of people waiting for like food rations and welfare, basically, and saying, "Well, this land's my land too." And we don't even talk about that.
Right. We've sanitized it.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? It makes you wonder how much.
Most of the schools I know have, or let me put it this way, a lot of people that I know have put that back in and made darn sure it stays back in.
That's cool.
There's a really powerful song to listen to sometime called The Power and the Glory. It sounds super patriotic, and it is a patriotic song. Phil Oakes wrote it.
Okay.
Listen to it.
Power and the Glory.
Power and the Glory. Listen to a lot of Phil Oakes music.
Yeah, I should.
Yeah.
The first time I ever heard that version of This Land Is Your Land, it was Bruce Springsteen singing it.
Right.
And I went, what's that verse?
Yeah.
Did Bruce write that verse? I was
no,
young.
he didn't.
Bruce did a whole album of Pete Seeger songs.
Yes, he did.
It's actually my favorite Bruce Springsteen album. I don't know if I should say this publicly, but I'm not the biggest fan of Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, you're right in my ballpark then, because
I'm not the only. Sometimes I feel like the only one.
You're not.
Sometimes I feel like the only one. But there's another guy that he's never shied away from being political.
And I respect that about him. And all of the other performers, Joan Baez, who's still standing up and saying, this is not right.
Yep. There's a lot of that, and it's always, I think it's always interesting when it does cross into the mainstream a little bit too.
Yeah.
Joan Baez certainly did that, but her voice is like, Joan Baez could sing like the instructions on how to put batteries
the phone book,
in it.
right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I can imagine seeing her live. Have you seen her?
I have many times.
I'm sure it's amazing.
Yeah. Here's another one who brings it to a much more modern place, Lady Gaga.
Yes.
She has her politics right out there.
She does.
Love her or hate her, she has a powerful voice, a wonderful voice. She's written some amazing music that both she and other people have sung.
Yeah.
And she is not afraid to stand up there and say it.
It's cool when that happens.
Yeah, it's great.
And there's so many, the other thing is it doesn't just have to be like overtly political. I mean, it can be. John Mellencamp wrote about the small town, like it's, if you can connect to people, I feel like it's what they do with it afterwards.
Right. Cy Khan, who's written about small towns that have sort of gone away after the industry was shipped out. Aragon Mill. I mean, there's song after song. That's about change. It's about recognizing what's happened.
Yeah. And it's not sugarcoating it.
No, you could write a song about Newport.
I'm actually writing a song. I live in Orleans.
But you work in Newport.
I do, but I walk around Orleans, and I'm currently writing. Nobody steal this from me because I haven't copyrighted it yet. As I walk around the town, I envision Ethan Allen and how much that place used to be 24 hours a day just humming, and now it's down to like one shift. And as I walk around the town and I look at some of the repair, and it's in good shape, but it does need repair. It's a small town, if Ethan Allen ever decides to shut their doors to this particular factory,
it's dead.
What's going to happen to this town? What's going to happen to my I mean, I pay pretty high taxes anyway because it's such a small village.
Right.
I would imagine my taxes would go through the roof if Ethan Allen
Exactly.
wasn't there to. So I'm actually writing a song about that, and a joke saying that I'm writing my first Bruce Springsteen song because
you're writing
because it's like 8 minutes long right now, and it'll be whittled down. It's not going to be that long, but I do it as I'm walking. I walk around. That's the good thing about technology. I've got a note thing, so I'm walking around. People probably think I'm texting or like, look at him, he's walking around on Facebook, but it's my notes app, and
that's political. That's important.
Yeah.
And that's musicians working for social change.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think the next thing is just connecting to the people. I really feel like I feel like this day and age that's more important than ever because we do have the internet and we can share, but you can't. It's really hard to convey a feeling, a communal feeling
really is.
On the internet, because you can write something and mean it well, and it comes across not that way to somebody else, and they could be offended, and then it starts this whole. If you can be there and you can be in a crowd and you can, there's this, I don't really know how to explain it.
There's the energy.
The energy, it is.
Yeah.
Well, we
the
are
synergy
energy,
and the energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and
you feel it.
And I'm always, and then there's the opposite spectrum too, where it's just pure entertainment.
Right.
And
which is fine.
And
comedy
fine.
and song is wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And that's just as effective sometimes.
You will be shocked to know we have just talked our way through 30 minutes.
We did?
Yeah.
Well,
can we do this again sometime?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. I find it a fascinating subject because...
Me too, obviously.
Yeah. I've anytime. I'm like the resident folk singer of the area, right? So.
You are indeed. The Orleans troubadour.
The Orleans troubadour. But I am from Newport.
Yeah, exactly. You've got both.
I grew up on the east side.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.